In this chapter, we're going to be discussing inheritance. Inheritance is the ability of a class to inherit its properties and methods from another class. A class that another class inherits from is called the base class or the superclass, and a class that inherits its data members and methods from another class is called a derived class or a subclass. The best way to discuss inheritance is to show an example. So let's go ahead and get started with an example. We're going to start with a class called account. Think of it like some type of bank account, checking account, or a savings account. But it's not a specific type of account. It's just an account. So an account could have several different data members. We're going to stick with two here. An ID, which we'll define as a string, and a balance, which we will define as a decimal. And a decimal is just a type of floating point data type that has more precision than double does, so that we're not prone to round off errors when we're working with money. We'll have two constructors, a default constructor, which will set the ID to the empty string and the balance to 0, and then a fully parameterized constructor, which will take two parameters for the ID and the balance. Notice that even though ID is a number, we're going to define it as a string because we don't do any operations on that number. And then the balance is equal to bow. After the constructor, we're not going to create any properties here. That will get in the way of what I'm trying to demonstrate. We'll create a couple of methods though. One method to deposit money into the account. So deposit will take a decimal value and add it to the balance. And then we'll also create a withdraw method, which will subtract money from the account. And balance minus equal amount. And that will be enough to define our account class for now. Now we want to derive a class from the account class to form a specific type of account. So let's say we're going to write a class called checking account. And to indicate that we're inheriting from the account class, we put a colon and then the name of the class that we're inheriting from. A derived class can have its own data members, but for now we don't need any extra data members. We'll get to those in another lesson. We'll just stick with the data members that are part of the account class. So the first thing we need to do is create the constructor. And the constructor follows a kind of strange format. So watch what I do here. We still need the two parameters, string ID num and decimal val. But then right before we begin the body of the constructor, we call a keyword base. That calls the constructor for the base class account, which we have to do in a constructor call. For right now, that's all I'm going to define, because again, I just want to demonstrate the very basic mechanics of how inheritance works. So a checking account object won't do anything different than an account object. I just want to demonstrate that we can derive a class from another base class. So the first thing let's do is let's create an account object. We'll call it ACCT equals new account, and we'll assign an ID of 1 and a balance of 100. Oh, we left out a method. Let's go back. We want to be able to display the balance. So let's write a toString method. We're overriding the object toString, so I'm going to erase the call to the object's toString method, and we're going to say return ID num plus a colon and a space plus the balance. ID num is the parameter, so let's fix that real quick. There we go. So now we have a way to display what's in the object. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an account object. Let's display its balance and the ID. Let's withdraw just a little bit of money, say $10, and then display the balance. We'll copy and paste to make it easier. And then let's deposit a little bit. Well, let's deposit another 100. And then let's display again. So let's run this code real fast. So we started out with 100, we withdrew 10, took us to 90, and then we added 100 to take us to 190. Very good. Now, let's create a checking account object. Notice that I didn't do anything other than define the constructor. So we'll call this a C account equals new checking account. The ID will be 2, and the beginning balance is 5,000. When I call the checking account object, notice that IntelliSense gives me all of the methods that are part of the account class, even though I didn't define deposit or withdraw specifically in checking account. So I can deposit some money. We can display the balance. We got to change that name right here. Then we can withdraw some and then display the balance. Change the name. And there we go. Let's run the code. This is a very simple example of how inheritance works. We derive checking account from the account class. We call the constructor from the base class in order to assign data to the data members. And then we can use the methods from the base class directly with our derived class objects. Now, one thing we might do, and we're going to do this in the very next lesson, is we might want to modify withdraw for checking accounts so that maybe there's an overdraft limit or some other type of rule. How to override base class methods to make them more useful for a derived class. So we'll do that in the next lesson.